Tuesday, September 4th, 2018, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. This morning, I'd like to talk about the Swiss franc, why it's been a safe haven, a little bit about Switzerland, which will explain why. There have been some viewers asking about the Swiss franc, why it's a safe haven, and I'll touch upon that. Before that, of course, I will look at the markets and what they're doing. So right now it's 8:15 a.m. London time, and spot gold unfortunately is down again this morning. It's down $6 at 11.95. The high's been 12.02 and the low has been 11.94. As you can see by this chart though, that low on the 16th of August or early or late 15th of August US time at 11:60 is still looks like a capitulation low. Am I concerned? No. Is it frustrating? I know it's very frustrating, not only for people who have gotten involved in gold recently, but also for myself, who's been involved in gold for many years. And this is not the first time we've been in such a frustrating market for precious metals. But what you need to remember, and what I try to think when these kinds of things happen, is do I really want to put my money into the banks and leave it there? And as we know nowadays, when you leave money in the bank, it's not yours anymore. It's an unsecured loan to banks that are still heavily zombie banks. And the only reason they've survived is that the central banks have printed funny money to take away their toxic assets and put it into their balance sheets. So that's what I think about when these kinds of things happen. I know it's frustrating, but it will pay off in the end of the day. And that's only my opinion. It's not advice. That's the way I position myself. It's up to you to decide what you do. Silver, of course, is getting hit harder. It's down over 1%, or down 17 cents at 14.32. The Dow is up 38 at 26,040, up 0.15%. S&P is up 3 points at 29.10, and the Nasdaq is up 10 at 76.81. Currencies. The pound is down again here at 128.50, down 0.2%. So not looking very good for the pound, the price action. The euro is weaker as well, as down 1/3% at 115.80, and the dollar is fairly strong against the yen right now, up 1/3% at 111.40. Crude oil is back above $70, is up 1/3% at 70.15, and the dollar is up fairly well against the yuan, the Chinese currency. It's at 684.50, up 0.15%. So yeah, everything seems to be set against gold at the moment. You've got weaker sterling and euro, stronger dollar against the yen, and also against the yuan. So it's not surprising that gold and silver have been hit. What else? Turkish lira. Well, that's at 664, down 1/3%. The dollar is at 664. The dollar yesterday closed up against the Brazilian real at 417. So it's closed right now. We'll have to keep an eye on it. The bond markets, Italian yields have backed off. It's at 305 right now. They closed at 322 last Friday. So things have seemed to stabilize a little bit. When bond yields go down, prices of the bonds go up, of course. The 10-year yield is up 2 basis points at 288. So still below that 3% level, but really going not going anywhere. So now I want to talk about Switzerland. Well, the Swiss are famous for their Swiss Army knives, the Swiss franc, of course, I've got a 2 franc coin here. For some reason I don't have a 1 franc coin, but it's a 2 franc coin. The Swiss used to have silver coinage up until 1968, like a lot of European countries, but that was taken off circulation as well back in 68, unfortunately. What else? Before going into why the Swiss franc is a safe haven, I want to look at the history of Switzerland. So, I think we need to go back to the Napoleonic Wars, or the Napoleonic era. So I'll read here from Wikipedia. It says, in 1798, the revolutionary French government conquered Switzerland and imposed a new unified constitution, decentralized the government of the country, effectively abolishing the cantons, which are like states. Moreover, Mulhausen joined France, and the Valtellina Valley became part of the Cisplain Republic, separating from Switzerland. Of course, this didn't stay like this. And in 1815, after the end of the Napoleonic Wars, at the Congress of Vienna, they fully reestablished Swiss independence, and the European powers agreed to permanently recognize Swiss neutrality. Swiss troops still served foreign governments until 1860, and they fought in the siege of Gaeta. The treaty also allowed Switzerland to increase its territory with the admission of the cantons of Valais, Neuchâtel, and Geneva. Switzerland's borders have not changed since, except for some minor adjustments. The other interesting thing about Switzerland, ever since then, it's been a very stable country. The major language is German, Swiss German. I think it's about 65% of the population speaks that. I would say about 25% speak French on the western part of Switzerland. And in the southern part of Switzerland, maybe about 5 to 10% speak Italian. And then there's a fourth language called Romanche, which is spoken maybe by 30 to 40,000 people. It's way out in the east of Switzerland, near the border of Austria. So 4 languages. If you look at a Swiss banknote, it has the 4 different languages. So that's another interesting thing about Switzerland. But probably not many of you know, but Switzerland in the middle of the 19th century restored kind of a federal state. And I'll read here from Wikipedia. Thus, while the rest of Europe saw revolutionary uprisings, the Swiss drew up a constitution which provided for a federal layout, much of it inspired by the American example. This constitution provided for a central authority while leaving the cantons the right to self-government on local issues. Giving credit to those who favored the power of the cantons, the Sonderbund Kantone, the National Assembly was divided between an upper house and a lower house. Referendums were made mandatory for any amendments of this constitution. This new constitution also brought a legal end to nobility in Switzerland. A single system of weights and measures introduced in 1850, the Swiss franc, and became the Swiss single currency. So there you have it. Before this, a lot of the cantons had their own different currencies. So again, this is very interesting. Switzerland, drew up this constitution, which is similar to the American Constitution, right in the middle of Europe. So that's another reason why Switzerland has been such a safe haven and a stable place. You've got the neutrality, you've got the Constitution, which mirrored the American Constitution. You had a new currency based on weight of silver, sound money, right? And now I want to show you why geographically as well Switzerland has been so important and a safe haven. If you look at a map of Europe, you can see there SWITZ for Switzerland, and it's a small country. I think the population now is 8 to 10 million. It's not a big country, but you can see it's right in the middle of Europe. It borders France, it borders Germany, it borders Austria, it borders Italy, the main three protagonists in Europe. And then if you look closer at the Swiss map, and this is a topographical map, you can see why the neutrality and the safe haven exist. To the south, with the border of Italy, there are the Alps. So it's very hard to get over the Alps. So Switzerland is protected in the south, protected in the east from Austria. In the north, you have the Jura Mountains in the northwest. With Germany, you don't really have mountains, but you've got the Lake Constance, or Bodensee, as they say in Germany. So that's how it's protected there. In the far west, you've got Geneva, which, as you saw, joined Switzerland in the early 1800s. It used to be kind of a city-state. And you've got France at the south, and that's also protected by mountains. And Lake Geneva, which is called Lac Léman in French. So you can see how Switzerland is protected. And the neutrality, in my opinion, has helped keep... And the Constitution has basically made Switzerland like a safe haven, like a United States of America, right in the middle of Europe. And that's why I think the people who drew up the Congress of Vienna, which a lot of people say the Rothschilds were involved, they decided to make Switzerland like the safe deposit box for the elite, for the New World Order, if you like to call it, but not just for them, but anyone who had some wealth and wanted to protect it. Switzerland provided that safe haven because the rule of law, the neutrality. And one thing I know about Switzerland as well, because I lived there, every male Swiss citizen at age 18 goes to the army. I think now it's changed, but at the time I lived there, you had to go to the army for 2 weeks every year until you're 50. And so every Swiss male over 18 has like weapons at home from the army. So everyone keeps a rifle in Switzerland. There are regulations to, how you can get the ammunition, of course. And I remember when I lived in Switzerland, I traveled all over Switzerland. I drove all over Switzerland. Why did I do that? Well, because I used to play a lot of golf, play golf tournaments. I used to go play in Zurich, and I lived in Geneva. So you can see Geneva is very far away from everywhere else. So I know Switzerland really well, and I remember playing golf on the weekends. Different places you could always hear the shooting. People at driving ranges. So the Swiss are prepared, and I think that's one of the reasons why they talk about why during World War II the Germans didn't try to invade Switzerland, because they wouldn't have succeeded because of the mountains. The other reason they give is because Switzerland is where the warring factions keep their wealth. That's another reason. Bank for International Settlements is in Basel. It's right on the border between Germany, France, and Switzerland. It's actually a supranational institution, even though it's in Switzerland. So what about the Swiss franc? I'll first show you a chart of the Swiss franc since the mid-70s. And this is how many Swiss francs you can get for the dollar. And you can see how the Swiss franc has done really well against the dollar. It was almost 4 there at the left end of the chart in the 70s, and now it's basically flatlining around 1, just below 1. So with $1 now, you can't even get 1 Swiss franc. You get about 95 centimes, or Rappen, as they call it in German, and that's why the Swiss franc. This is the pictorial history of the Swiss franc. And why has it been a safe haven, the Swiss franc? Well, let's go to our friend Wikipedia again, and they talk about why the Swiss franc has been a safe haven. And I'll read. The Swiss franc has historically been considered a safe haven currency with virtually zero inflation and a legal requirement that a minimum of 40% be backed by gold reserves. However, this link to gold, which dates from the 1920s, was terminated on May 1st, 2000 with a referendum. By March 2005, following a gold selling program, the Swiss National Bank held 1,290 tons of gold in reserves, which equates to 20% of its assets. So I can tell you as well, because I haven't lived in Switzerland since the early 90s, but I remember up until the late 90s, the Swiss property market, even though property is expensive in Switzerland, depending on the place, the Swiss property market, real estate, was very stable, mainly because the money was sound. But I can tell you that after this move away from gold, since 2000, low interest rates, there's been a real estate bubble in Switzerland, in my opinion, and that's because of this. Why did Switzerland decide to go off this kind of gold standard? Well, I think it was, there's a lot of pressure put on from the Americans. They brought up also the history of Switzerland during World War II. I think that was an excuse. It was a way to convince the Swiss people that they needed to get off this gold standard, that it was, a lot of it was because it was gold they acquired during World War II. But I think this was just propaganda, because you couldn't have the dollar remain the global reserve currency. You couldn't have all the post Glass-Steagall abolition in 1999. You couldn't have the banking system explode into derivatives if you had a safe haven currency like Switzerland. That's like the Swiss franc, and that's why I think that happened, unfortunately, and the Swiss voted to get rid of their gold backing. I would say the Swiss franc is not a strong safe haven as it used to be, but it still is. Switzerland is still a very stable country. It's still very neutral. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share it, subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. You can also follow me on Steemit, DTube, and on Twitter. I'll talk to you later. Take care. Bye.